What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at the Open Ultra League, and the team we're going to take a look at today is Steelix, Golisopod, and GIRATINA Altered. Now, GIRATINA is actually coming to the Great League in the newest Shadow event, so let's take a look at it in the Ultra League just to see how it performs one last time. Without further ado, I want to say a special thank you to the expert trainer members on this channel, Benny Hemlock, Dr. Green Mustache, and Soham Patil, as well as the legend trainer members on this channel, Big Burden, Andrew Pitten, Musachu, Noodleman, Speedster, Esteros, Liminal Lagomorph, and Tom Spencer. Let's hop into some battles. So the first opponent we're going to see is a Feraligatr on the lead, and this is a pretty solid lead because Thunderfangs are super effective. I try and go for a Hydro Cannon catch on my Golisopod. I am unsuccessful, but the opponent is going to end up throwing energy anyways, and it turns out this is a Crunch Feraligatr. They then go for an X-Scissor catch onto their Weezing, but they are unsuccessful because I hold on to my energy. I now connect with an Aqua Jet, and now here comes Aqua Jet number 2. This will do some solid chip to the Weezing, but it will not be enough to knock out, and these Fury Cutters are double resisted, so they're really not doing too much damage in this matchup. In fact, they're doing exactly 1 damage per Fury Cutter. They end up connecting with a Brutal Swing, but that is not enough to pick up the knockout, so here comes an Aqua Jet that actually grabs the shield from the opponent. They're not going to commit to the farm down, worried about me making it to another charge move, so they pick up the knockout with a Brutal Swing, and now I can just come back in with the Steelix. It turns out to be a Drapion in the back, so I throw 4 Thunderfangs, pivot into my Giratina, and catch the Aqua Tail where it is resisted, and that also allows me to outpace by 1 singular turn because I was able to sneak a Shadow Claw in, and now the opponent probably will connect with a Crunch, but I know I can survive 1, so I will let this go. And at this point, oh, they actually throw an Aqua Tail. Maybe they're on Aqua Tail Sludge Bomb. Either that or it was a horrible bait. I don't know why my opponent would bait there. So, yeah, just gonna let that go. Gonna no shield us, especially if they're Aqua Tail Sludge Bomb. That would be hilarious. They must be, yeah, 2 Aqua Tails back to back. So my opponent is actually completely walled in this matchup. Does not matter that they are a Dark type. They're gonna throw their energy. Even if they're on Sludge Bomb, they should go for the Sludge Bomb because that is stab and it hits harder. It's just a better damage per energy move. But here we go. The opponent makes it to it. Wait, they were on Crunch that whole time. Why were they baiting so many times? That is so bizarre. My win con was just 2 shielding my Steelix to win the game anyways. I don't know why they would bait so many times. They just needed to grab shields or take out the Giratina. So very, very strange play from my opponent. But either way, that allows me to shield both Hydro Cannons, go for the full Thunderfang farm down. What's going to come in here is going to be the Weezing or is going to be the low HP Drapion. The Weezing is also pretty low, and I believe they're 1 off a potential overheat. They do throw 1 Fairy Wind, and yeah, actually I guess I miscounted. They were exactly 1 off, whereas I thought they were like 2 off. Either way, I make it to back-to-back Psychic Fangs, and after living that, my opponent resigns the match, and we are able to take that win into next match. What seems like it should be a good lead. We've got Steelix into Forretress. Now the reason I say this feels like it should be a good lead is because Bug Bites are resisted in this matchup. However, you're going to notice something is that these Bug Bites are doing as much damage as my Thunderfangs, and that is the advantage of stab damage right there. That said, they actually connect with a super effective Earthquake. Fortunately, I'm able to outpace to a second charge move, make it to the Crunch before they make it to Earthquake number 2, and we do get the Forretress into the red. But my opponent is going to be able to take the zeros here. Rock Tomb is double resisted, so I probably will live this if they go for it, and I do. But they are able to get the Bug Bite farm down. But now in comes Giratina, also resisting the Bug Bites, and in comes a Blastoise. Now, this is a strange pivot from my opponent because in my experience, almost all Blastoise are on Hydro Cannon and Skull Bash. So unless this opponent is running Ice Beam for coverage, then they are completely walled, and this seems like a strange pivot. They do end up throwing their energy once they get to 6 rollouts, so this is enough for the Ice Beam, and they actually are running it, so very interesting. And then go for the Hydro or Ice Beam catch on a Mega Golisopod. Now that I know they are completely walled, they do throw the Hydro Cannon, and I can take that very comfortably. Absolutely no problem. They're throwing another one. We can absorb that, and now just going to go for the X's. You'll notice in a couple of these matchups, I am on Shadow Claw instead of Fury Cutter, but I do end up switching to Fury Cutter later, and Fury Cutter definitely felt better for the Ultra League, so especially because I've already got a Shadow Claw user in the back. That's just kind of a preference thing. You can run either or, both are very solid. Back in comes the Drifblim, and in comes the GIRATINA to answer it. I will shield up an Icy Wind because I know I can make it to one more charge move and probably grab the final shield for my opponent, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Shadow Sneak does grab the final shield. In comes the Forretress. They get the Bug Bite farm down, but that allows me to get the farm down with the Golisopod, and I'm only 2 Shadow Claws away, whereas they are going to get outpaced here. Aqua Jet picks up the knockout on the Drifblim, and we are able to take that win off of a 1 HP survive on Golisopod. Into next match, we've got Steelix into Jellicent. Now this is a pretty decent lead because we have super effective Thunderfangs and super effective Crunch. However, my opponent has Stab Surfs, and they have a pacing advantage when it comes to getting to those Surfs. So I can connect with a Crunch here. That does put the opponent into the yellow health range, but look, they're already at Crunch number 2. Fortunately, Steelix is absurdly bulky, so we can actually live 2 Crunches. In comes a Drapion. I throw 4 Thunderfangs, pivot into my Golisopod, hoping to get the Aqua Tail catch, but this time I am unsuccessful. So the opponent will connect with a Crunch, and they get the defense drop. That is extremely unfortunate. I end up clicking the X scissor here. This is just a mistake. You should always go Aqua Jet in this matchup because both Shard moves are neutral. Aqua Jet is just a better damage per energy move, but that's okay. I can shield up the next Crunch once I grab 1 shield, and now here comes an Aqua Jet. This will do some solid shit, but it will not actually be enough to pick up the knockout. Yeah, the opponent does live that, but I've put them into range where I can fully farm them down with either of my Pokemon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with my GIRATINA, go for a resisted Shadow Claw farm down to come out loaded with energy. What's in the back? It's a Swampert, and Swampert is typically completely walled if they're on Hydro Cannon and Sludge. So the fact that they came into this matchup and then made a catch makes me think that they might be running Earthquake. That said, they switch and catch on a Jellicent, but I do the perfect undercharge to get the absolutely massive farm down, come out loaded with energy, and now I just have to make it to like 4 Dragon Claws to pick up the knockout. They do farm up enough for the Earthquake, so I will actually respect it, and it is the Earthquake, so a rare Earthquake Swampert in the Ultra League. I know that is still the recommended moveset, but I've seen so many more Sludge Swamperts recently, and yeah, the opponent will just resign the match, and we are able to take that win. Interesting lead in the next match. We've got Steelix into Ursaring. Now, this is an interesting lead because they have to go for close combat here to do any meaningful damage. Swift is resisted, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect with a Psychic Fangs and then try and go for a catch on my Golisopod, but I'm unsuccessful, and the opponent answers the Golisopod safe switch with a Cobalion. Now, Cobalion can make this matchup pretty awkward because Stone Edge is super effective damage and it pretty much one-shots the Golisopod. So in order to make this matchup interesting, I'm going to shield up the first, and now I can make it to back-to-back Aqua Jets before they make it to Stone Edge number 2. And now I can at least grab a shield back from my opponent before they're able to take me out. It doesn't look like I'm ever going to be able to do the Fury Cutter farm down, so I will just let this go, especially because my opponent overfarmed absolutely perfectly in this matchup. But now, in comes the Steelix. Steelix, of course, can absorb a Sacred Sword, no problem. We're very bulky. It looks like we can actually absorb 2 of them, but my opponent is going to pivot back into the Ursaring and snipe with a close combat. They're at another one, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw 1 more Thunderfang, pivot into my GIRATINA, catch the close combat where it's double resisted, and now that their defense is 4 times lowered, I can go for a double resisted Shadow Claw farm down, and these do not look like a double resisted fast move. They do make it to a final charge move. It is just a Swift. Both of those are double resisted, and in the back it is a Skeleturge. So this is a fantastic matchup. We connect with the super effective Ominous Wind, or sorry, Shadow Sneak. And now I can outpace, make it to a Dragon Claw before my opponent makes it to another charge move. They end up trying to farm to the back-to-back charge moves, but I pivot in the middle of their Incinerate, connect with the Crunch, that picks up the knockout. I'd be able to Thunderfang farm down the Cobalion, so the opponent resigns the match, and we are able to take that win. Pretty good lead in the next match. We've got Steelix into Bellibolt. The opponent is going to safe switch into an Avalugg, and this is a Pokemon I have not seen in the Ultra League in a very long time. Pretty much not since its release, so very strange to see it here. That said, they're completely walled unless they're running like Crunch or Body Slam, which most aren't. Most run Icy Wind or Avalanche plus like Earthquake. So seeing it here is fantastic because the Golisopod is a complete wall to their energy, and the fact that they're going straight Icy Wind tells me that they are likely on Icy Wind plus Earthquake. That said, here comes an Aqua Jet that picks up the knockout. Back in comes the Bellibolt, and the Bellibolt is actually on Thundershock, so that explains why they got out of that matchup so quickly against the Steelix. But now that we have alignment, that is absolutely massive because I can make it 2 back-to-back Aqua Jets. This will basically put the opponent into the yellow health range, and it does. In comes the Steelix. In the back, it's a Superior, and yeah, that's just a triple hard counter game. My opponent will resign the match, and we are able to take that win. Bit of a tricky lead in the next match. Steelix into Guzzlord, but the opponent safe switches into a Typhlosion, and now Typhlosion will be met with Giratina. Giratina, of course, can absorb any charge move here. Thunder Punch, Blast Burn, both are resisted. The opponent, actually running some interesting tech, ends up going for a Solar Beam. Very interesting. Maybe trying to lure out like a Gastrodon with their Typhlosion safe switch. That said, they will be able to make it to 1 final charge move. However, this should only be enough for a Thunder Punch. So my opponent just running anti-water moveset on this Typhlosion. If you're going to do that, you may as well just run Shadow Claw. That could be interesting. That said, back in comes the Guzzlord. Guzzlord will be met with back-to-back Dragon Claws, and now I can just align my Steelix, and in the back it's a Skeleturge, and unfortunately we are on Fury Cutter here. However, our pacing is absolutely amazing. We get to the Aqua Jet even though the opponent had like an Incinerate head start. Before the opponent gets to their first charge move, they will start spamming out these Torch Stallings, but I will always be able to outpace by a single turn, and that is what is going to basically decide this matchup, because what I can do is I can just match shields, go for double Aqua Jet, just watch for the catch, make sure my opponent is in the middle of the Incinerate, and this game should be over. And that's exactly what happens. I make it to a 3rd Aqua Jet. This will be enough to not pick up the knockout. The Skeleturge actually lives on 1 HP, but they throw their charge move. Worried I'd be able to get the farm down, and now in comes the Steelix. We get the Thunderfang farm down, and Steelix against a half HP Guzzlord is going to be a win, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we've got Steelix into Drifblim. This is a fantastic lead. Thunderfang is super effective, and we have Crunch for coverage. The opponent is actually staying in this matchup, which kind of surprises me because this is not a very good matchup for the Drifblim. Even if they full send the Shadow Ball, in comes a Lapras, and now we see why. My opponent is ABA weak to Electric, and they don't really have any good answers to Steelix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw like 6 Thunder Fangs, connect with the Psychic Fangs as well to lower their defense, and then pivot into my Golisopod where my opponent is completely walled. They end up throwing the Surf. My only guess is they're completely out of TMs, just like me, so they end up just going for the Surf instead of the Sparkling Aria, but Sparkling Aria is definitely the move you want to go for here. It is the same amount of energy, it just does more damage. Back in comes the Drifblim. Drifblim now will be met with an Aqua Jet. This will do some solid shit, but it will not be enough to pick up the knockout. But now back in comes the Steelix. They will make it to an Icy Wind here, but this is not enough for a second Shadow Ball, so I can no-shield this. Steelix lives that very comfortably, and now I can go for the full Thunderfang farm down, come out absolutely loaded with energy for whatever's in the back, and it's my opponent's own Steelix in the back. So no great answers to a Steelix on the opposing enemy's team, which is great for me because this allows me to get to back-to-back crunches. I unfortunately don't get any debuff, but can I make it to a 3rd crunch? I can. If this one gets the debuff, that would be absolutely massive, but either way, this game is in the bag. Even if they're on Breaking Swipe, this should be a fairly comfortable win. In comes the Giratina. I will let the first charge move go in case it is a Psychic Fangs. It's actually a Earthquake from my opponent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overfarm massively here, go for the Shadow Sneak. This will do some solid chip, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for a catch of the Earthquake onto my Golisopod, and I think we got it. Is it the Earthquake? It is. My opponent fully undercharges that to get the extra Thunderfang in worth of energy. But that's okay, I can still outpace. I have all the energy loaded from earlier. I grab the final shield from my opponent. At this point, I will start shielding up because I've got 2 left and I don't want to get just farmed down by the Lapras. The Lapras comes back in, but Lapras just cannot get to back-to-back charge moves here before I get the full farm down, and then I'll come out with a Shadow Sneak loaded, so my opponent just resigns the match and we are able to take that win. Terrible lead in the next match. Steelix into Ninetales. I'm going to pivot into my Golisopod, and unfortunately Golisopod on Fury Cutter here will also be outpaced, and I will consistently be outpaced by a single turn. So I'm in a very difficult situation here. I have to come in with my Golisopod because Steelix would get absolutely ruined, but the opponent will always be able to outpace. Fortunately, my opponent does shield up the first, so I'm just going to shield back and at least grab 2 shields from my opponent. It looks like I might be able to get to a third Aqua Jet unless my opponent throws their energy. It's going to be really close. The opponent doesn't want to didn't want to commit to it, so they do end up throwing this Weather Ball. It does pick up the knockout, but now in comes the Giratina. Giratina likely a complete wall to the opponent. The opponent pivots into a Malamar, and Malamar will be met with a Dragon Claw. I'm going to throw one more Shadow Claw and then pivot into my Steelix. Now the reason I do this is because this forces the opponent to go for Superpower and lower their attack and defense if they want to do any meaningful damage, and that is why my opponent goes for a Foul Play first. But this is still a very solid matchup because I can still live a Superpower as well. So Steelix will just no shield this. I'm banking that a Giratina with a shield advantage should be my win con in this endgame. The Ninetales does come back in, only to be met with a Psychic Fangs, and now in comes the Giratina. The opponent is absolutely loaded with energy, so I will just let the charge move go. I still don't know what's in the back. It's actually a Psyshock, so my opponent not completely walled, running some Psyshock tech for coverage, which is pretty nice. I will no shield both. I live both, and it kind of just depends on what's in the back. Back in comes the Malamar. Malamar will get off a Foul Play, and that's why I couldn't shield. And in comes a Primeape. Primeape will be met with Dragon Claw number 1, but now here comes Dragon Claw number 2, and I'm already basically at a third. Not quite, but I think I'm 1 away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to instantly pivot into my Giratina. I get the catch, which is absolutely massive. It is the Rage Fist. It actually doesn't pick up the knockout, so my opponent gets one more Karate Chop in. I throw 2 Shadow Claws so that I can outpace the opponent by a single Karate Chop. That picks up the knockout. In comes the Malamar. I then outpace the Malamar as well, getting to another Dragon Claw, and Giratina going absolutely crazy in this endgame to take that win. Into the next match, I've got Steelix into Alolan Ninetales this time. So Ninetales coming out in these matchups, but this Ninetales is on Charm instead of Ember. So this is a very positive matchup. Pretty funny how the 2 different variants have very different matchups into Steelix. That said, the opponent will make it to a Weather Ball, and at least this is neutral damage, and I'm kind of surprised at how much damage these charms are doing to Steelix, considering how bulky Steelix is and how close this matchup is turning out to be, because they're going to get me into the yellow health range, and I'm only just now getting them into the red. They're going to make it to a final charge move as well before I'm able to get to the full farm down. Can they put me in the red here? They can. That is absolutely crazy. I do come out loaded with energy, and there's got to be a reason my opponent stayed in that matchup. So if I'm ABB strong to whatever comes in, then I will pivot, and that's exactly what I do. In comes the Golisopod into the Swampert, and Swampert will pivot out into a Tentacruel in the back, and now Tentacruel will be met with an onslaught of Aqua Jets from the Golisopod. And this is kind of what I anticipated. They were weak to Steelix in the back. Of course, Tentacruel. This Tentacruel is running Poison Sting, so Poison Sting is triple resisted, and Thunder Fangs are super effective, which is why my opponent felt uncomfortable switching out of that matchup. That said, it looks like my opponent is actually completely walled. They must be running Scald plus Blizzard because they are not connecting with any neutral damage, and these Poison Stings are just not adding up enough because they are great for energy generation but not for damage. In comes the Swampert. I would make it to another charge move, so the opponent is forced to throw their energy, and at this point this game is over, especially now that we've seen the Sludge. That means they are completely walled by my Giratina. Both Hydro Cannon and Sludge are resisted. Poison of the Sludge is resisted on Ghost, and Hydro of the Water is resisted on Dragon. So in comes the Giratina after 2 Psychic Fangs debuffs, and the opponent will resign the match. Tough lead in the next match. We've got Steelix into Primeape. I'm going to safe switch into my Golisopod, and Golisopod will get hit with a Rage Fist. So I can let this go. This is not going to do too much damage, and I will throw right before they make it to Rage Fist number 2, but the opponent makes a really nice play. They throw 3 more Karate Chops and catch onto their Lapras, where an Aqua Jet is resisted. So very nice play. Yes, they did kind of waste a boost of the Rage Fist, but they have some banked energy for later. This Lapras is over farming like massive, or like crazy, and that allows me to get to another X-Scissor. I don't believe they actually had enough for the Skull Dash until now, so I will just let this go. I've done some pretty solid chip, and getting an energy lead on Steelix looks pretty nice. My opponent, worried that I would get to another charge move after connecting with a resistant Sparkling Aria, throws another Sparkling Aria, which means they are completely energy dry. In comes the Steelix to get a 3 Thunderfang head start, and the Primeape comes back in, only to throw on the CMP tie with my Psychic Fangs. I know I can live a close combat here, and if they close combat, a Psychic Fangs is going to do a lot of damage. So my opponent instead goes for the Rage Fist. I end up calling that bait. Psychic Fangs connects. What am I going to do here? I'm going to go for a catch of the close combat on my Giratina. I'm unsuccessful. My opponent waited the turn and held on to their energy, and that means that they have banked all that energy for later. That said, Giratina into Talonflame is an extremely dominant matchup, even without Ancient Power for coverage. The opponent did actually respect an Ancient Power with the first shield, and now they will get to charge move number 1. Is it going to be the Brave Bird? Is it going to be a Fly? It is the Fly, which means they will have slightly better pacing in this matchup, but I will be able to put them into a range where I can Shadow Claw farm them down, but instead I'm going to catch a Brave Bird onto my Steelix, and that wastes all their energy. In comes the Primeape, and yeah, I've just got too much energy loaded on the Giratina. I'm able to make it to a Psychic Fangs as well. My opponent knows that this game is over, so they resign the match, or they let it go, and we are able to take that win. Okay, Shadow Dusknoir. Now this is a bit of a tricky lead because yes, we have Crunch for coverage, but they have super effective Dynamic Punch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw 7 Thunderfangs and then pivot into my Golisopod and get the catch of the Dynamic Punch where it is resisted. The opponent responds with a Blastoise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw the X-Scissor on the CMP tie after 6 rollouts with the Skull Bash. This will be enough to pick up the knockout because the rollouts have put me in range, and Skull Bash does pick up the knockout, but what that lets me do is get a huge Thunderfang farm down on Steelix. I will throw a single Psychic Fangs, that way I can just get this farm down a little bit easier, and they will only be able to make it to 1 singular charge move, and that is okay. I can live that fairly comfortably, and now because these rollouts are double resisted, I can get the full Thunderfang farm down. In comes the Dusknoir. Now Dusknoir will be met with a super effective Crunch. They let that go. In comes the Giratina. Can we snipe and get the farm down? Not quite. So I will respect a Shadow Punch because from a Shadow Dusknoir, that would hurt a little bit, and we still don't know what's in the back. And thank goodness I did, because it is a Cradily, and it's a Bullet Seed Cradily at that. So yes, their energy generation is a little bit faster, but I will be able to outpace here because of my energy lead, and Bullet Seed and Grass Knot are resisted, so they're forced to go for Rock Tomb in this matchup, and because I've kept my Steelix alive, I can just instantly reset that debuff whenever I want, but not before I go for a Dragon Claw. I'm probably going to throw 1 and try and go for the catch. I'm unsuccessful. My opponent holds onto their energy, and then they wait the turn and catch on a Dusknoir, which is an absolutely massive play for my opponent. Psychic Fangs does pick up the knockout, however, and my opponent is still forced to throw energy, or else I would make it to a charge move. Grass Knot does pick up the knockout. Back in comes the Giratina. I know I can live 1 Rock Tomb from this range, so I will just let this go. Giratina is monstrously bulky, and now all I have to do is make it to 3 Dragon Claws before my opponent is able to make it to 2 more Rock Tombs. So Dragon Claw number 1 does grab a shield. Here comes Dragon Claw number 2. This will still not be enough to pick up the knockout, so I will need a 3rd Dragon Claw or the Shadow Claw farm down. I will respect this Rock Tomb. I do not believe they're quite at the back-to-back. I believe they are either 3 or 4 short. I know they were energy dry pretty much. That allows me to outpace, make it to the Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw from this range picks up the knockout on the Cradily, and once again, Giratina is able to sweep an endgame. Interesting lead in the next match. Steelix into Talonflame. I'm just going to stay in this matchup because Thunderfangs are super effective. And yes, their Incinerators are super effective, but if they're on Fly plus Brave Bird here, they're completely walled. But because my opponent undertaps the move and throws their energy right away, that pretty much tells me they are on Flame Charge. But then they throw the Flame Charge and then pivot into their Poliwrath in the back, which is a bit of a strange play. I connect with a few super effective Thunderfangs as well as a super effective Psychic Fangs before coming in with my Giratina, because now their defense is lowered, so even if they Icy Wind me, we're basically just doing neutral damage. And now I can just go for a Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw, of course, will not be enough to pick up the knockout, but neither will another Icy Wind, so I will just let this second Icy Wind go. And yes, this is super effective damage, but it does not pick up the knockout. Can I get the full Shadow Claw farm down is the question. It's going to be close, but I do get it. That is absolutely massive. Back in comes the Talonflame. Talonflame now to be met with Dragon Claw number 1. This will do some okay chip, but because my attack is lowered, it's not going to be fantastic. It's twice lowered, actually. And I'm able to make it to 2 Dragon Claws. In comes a Guzzlord in the back, but here comes Dragon Claw number 3. I had so much energy on the Giratina. That's super effective damage, but it doesn't look like it. In comes Golisopod. Golisopod can survive 1 charge move, either Dragon Claw or Brutal Swing here. It is the Brutal Swing, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to overfarm, go for the X's or right before my opponent makes it to a Brutal Swing number 2, and then I'm just going to under tap the move, anticipating my opponent to throw their energy right away, but they do not. They go for the extra Dragon Claw. Now the question is, can they get a full farm down coming out loaded with energy? You see me, I go for the Aqua Jet here. This was to cover for a catch in case they went for it, but they did not, and now I am able to pivot into my Steelix, get the Thunderfang farm down, and we are able to take that win. Sorry, I am like absolutely stumbling over my words like crazy. I am just so exhausted. I'm recording this at like, what time is it? 1:40 in the morning, just late night, just because I had a bunch of things going on. I just came back from vacation. I hope I look a little bit more tan, but you know what? I really don't. I don't know how I didn't. I laid out in the sun for like 12 hours a day for 6 days straight, and somehow I didn't get any tan. So I don't know. It's that olive Italian skin or something. But yeah, that's going to be it for me from this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, peace.